In this video I present 10 top tips for Capture One Pro Volume 3. If you find this video useful then please give it a thumbs up, and if you would like to see more then please subscribe. If you would like to try or buy Capture One Pro then please see the video description for links. Now with Capture One Pro you can create quite an interesting HDR effect using a single image and multiple layers of high dynamic range. So for this image the first thing I want to do is to just quickly set my exposure. I think that's about right, that'll do. Then off we go with the high dynamic range. All the way up with the highlights and shadows. And this has the effect of compressing the tones in the image. Tone compression is the basis of HDR. And then go into the levels and bring in the blacks to make it look nice. I think that's pretty good. I'll just up the mids a little bit. That's not bad at all. So down to the clarity and increase the structure, which introduces local contrast, which is also a staple of HDR processing. And there we go, we have some HDR. To increase the HDR effect, just create another layer in the layers panel by holding the little plus down, then choosing new filled layer. And then again back to our high dynamic range like so, and I'll just max the highlights and shadows again. Again, bring in the blacks. I think that looks pretty good. That's looking very HDR indeed. And for the final touch I think I'll just add a load more structure. Then back to my background layer for some final tweaks. I think I will reduce the saturation a tad. And then add a little vignette for effect. And there we have it, a HDR effect made with a single image in Capture One Pro. And if you want to add more HDR, just keep adding layers of highlights and shadows. And if we take a look at the before and after, there's before and after. Then we can see that even though we haven't used multiple images, it's not a true HDR image. It's still an interesting effect and could be useful. Here's a nice little trick to create an evenly blue sky. As we can see in this picture, we have a nice blue sky, but it's very uneven. I'd like it to be deep blue and even. First thing I'll do to create the deep blue is to go to the Advanced tab of my colour editor, select the colour picker, select a blue, and then expand the range. Then make sure I've got all of the blues selected, like so. Let's view the selected colour range. Using this will turn everything else grey so that I can see the blue. Good, all the sky's selected. Now I can turn that off. So I'm going to increase the saturation of the sky and bring down the lightness. Blue is nice here and here. Now I would like the whole of the sky to be an even blue. All you have to do is select the skin tone. Make sure your colour picker is active. And click on the shade of blue that you would like the sky to be. Then just expand out the selection here. Make sure I have all the blues selected, and in the uniformity area just bring all of the sliders up to maximum. And as you can see it's already starting to even out. But it's not even enough yet, so go to layers, hold down the plus and new filled layer. Then back to the colour editor. Make sure your skin tone picker is selected and select the blue again. Expand it out, whole range, and again 1, 2, 3. Max the uniformity controllers, and there we go, we've nearly got an even blue sky. But we're not quite there yet, so here we go again, once more, a new layer, filled layer, back to the colour editor, skin tone tab, picker and select blue. expand the range, make sure we've got all the blue and uniformity to maximum. And bingo! We have a lovely uniform blue sky. Here's before and after. We've turned the washed out, uneven sky into something deep blue and even. Sometimes it would be useful to have a copy of your image in the same folder as your original image. Now this happens automatically when you edit with an external application, but it could also be handy to create an image in the same folder just for further editing purposes without having to invoke an external application. You may just want to have the ability to easily view them side by side. Now the way to do this is to simply export the image into the folder the original resides in. In this case, my session capture folder. To do this, just right click on the image, choose export and variant. All you do is make sure that the destination is the same as the source folder. In my case, the capture folder. Just click for the destination drop down and choose folder. Now just navigate to the folder, in my case my current session. I've got it here ready to go, and then just choose the folder. Click select folder, and now it will output to the same folder as the source image, my capture folder. Next, set your image name, and to make sure that the new image appears side by side or underneath the original image in your library, make sure it has the same name. So go into our naming, and from the presets here, choose image name. And click OK. And as you can see, it says image name, and the samples says the image name plus the output postfix. Now all we have to do is to set our export parameters. For the format I will choose JPEG, but you could use TIFF, etc. And the quality is fine. Now the export height, I'll make sure it says fixed so it's the same size. Now I'm creating a copy of the variant, so it will contain the adjustments that I've applied to the original. It will inherit the cropping or colour and tone adjustments. This method is basically exactly the same as choosing the edit in function for your image, but without actually opening an external application. Okay, so that's all fine, and that's all fine, and click export. And once it's finished, there it is, a copy, a JPEG, exactly the same, just below the RAW file in the same folder. It's really handy for comparison. And I can also right click on the JPEG and choose Open With rather than Edit With to open the JPEG with something like Affinity Photo, which is really quick. This is real time. There we go, really fast, nice. Now I can do something with it. Let's put a really nice, gorgeous black sun in the sky. I'll use my really advanced art techniques here. Quit and save the changes, yes. And there I have it. Bingo. My copy next to my original. And of course I can right click and open with any application that I'd like. I can keep re-editing this new image and always have it next to the old image. Not only can you export in place, but you can also export in place but at a different size. If I right click on my original image, or I could right click on my new image and export that at a different size. In fact, that is what I'll do. Right click on the new image and export and variants. Make sure that the destination is the folder where the source resides, where these ones are. It already is. Image name I'm going to leave the same so that the new image appears next to the old image in the library. I'll keep the format as JPEG. Don't worry, it won't overwrite this image. It will just create another one of the same name but with an _1 extension so that it will still appear next to the originals. Everything else the same, but this time we pick scale and height. I do mine by height, but you could use width. I want 1080 pixels, so I already have 1080 in the box, so I'll choose pix from the drop down. So my image will be 1080p, export, and after a few seconds it will have completed the export and resize in place. OK the complete dialog. And now I have a copy of a copy in the same place, but this one is a different size. If I go over to the information tab, I can see that this is 1620 by 1080 and click on the original, which is 6000 by 4000. OK, that's how we create a copy in place and also how we create a resized copy in place. Nice. In this tip, I'll show you how I perform output sharpening. This time just for screen, because I'm not going to be actually doing any printing here. Now this method allows you to preview your sharpened image on screen and also doesn't use the inbuilt output sharpening tools, which I find a little cumbersome to tell you the truth. Okay, so the first stage is to take a look at the current sharpening on the image. With our hand tool, if we double click on the image, we can see that it's nice and sharp. My sharpening at full resolution is very good. I'm going to create a copy of this image, a smaller version for screen, for web viewing or screen viewing. So I'll export in place from the previous tip. So select export and then select variant. Make sure my destination folder is the same as my source folder, my capture folder. Look at the previous tip on how to do that. Set the image name, etc., JPEG, then scale and height, and I want the height to be 180 pixels, which I have set here. You set the pixels from the drop down here and just type in your height. Now before I actually perform the export, I have to make sure that the current sharpening that I've applied is applied to the image on output. The sharpening from this image wants to be in the destination image. So just go to adjustments, leave on respect crop, because I do want the crop on the image to be in the output image, and I need to set sharpening to no output sharpening. If you choose output for screen, it will ask for amount, radius and threshold. It will add further sharpening, which I will only be able to see after the image is output. So you are effectively doing screen sharpening blind, which I find a bit limiting. And also the same applies for print. You won't know until you have your output file. And if you select disable all, it will disable all of your sharpening, even the sharpening that you have applied to your source image. So the best choice here is no output sharpening. This will not add any more output sharpening, it will just include the sharpening that you applied during your image development. Okay, so that's all sorted, so I'll go back to basic, make sure everything else is okay, our name is fine, image name, etc. Remember to use the previous tip to see how to set all this up, and then I'll just hit export, and after a few seconds we will have our exported image. Here we go, here's the new image with the original sharpening. Okay, let's take a look. If I zoom in, it's now 1080p and it's nice and sharp. But if I want to sharpen it specifically for this resolution, make it really nice and crisp, I can now sharpen for screen. I can perform the screen sharpening on this new image. So I'll just go into the Details tab, quickly reset the sharpening, then bring my amount up. Then I'll add just a tiny bit of radius, just a little bit, let's say just 0.3. The amount obviously is too much at the moment, so again I can set my amount just to the small value needed. Now let's take a look. It's going to be pretty difficult to see on YouTube as it's only slight sharpening. If we look at before, it's slightly blurry, and after, and it's nice and sharp. And now this has the correct amount of sharpening for me for this image at this resolution. And now if we use the slideshow to view it full screen, like so, there it is sharpened for output. We have a lovely sharpened image at 1080p. We now have one final step to create an image which you can upload or use. We just need to output our sharpened image. Right click the image, export variant. I'm going to leave everything the same because in this case I want it to go back into my capture folder. You could output it where you want. Again, I'll keep the name the same. See the previous tip for how to set that. And then on the Adjustments tab, no output sharpening, so that it just includes the sharpening I've just performed, the screen sharpening, and Export. And it will create another image, our final image, which includes the screen sharpening which I just performed. If I zoom in like so, we can see it has the screen sharpening from the previous image. This image is now ready for the web or anywhere else where it will be viewed on a screen. Here's a cool little tip, a little input tip. I only found this one recently, accidentally. A little tip for the colour balance tool. If you want to play with the colour balance tool, the shadows and midtones and highlights, etc. Let's say for instance you want to set the shadows to be red, like so, and then you maybe want to make it darker. You would normally move the points and the sliders like so, just move them around with your mouse. But you can actually move every one of these controls with your mouse wheel, so that you can really easily perform single value adjustments. If you place your mouse anywhere over this curve here, just hover your mouse there and move your mouse wheel. It will move the saturation up and down a notch at a time. I think that's really cool. Capture One really has this input stuff covered. And also, if you put your mouse anywhere within this circle and move your mouse wheel up and down, it'll do exactly the same thing. Place your mouse on the outside circle and move your mouse wheel and it will change the hue, like so. And it also works for the luminance. If we place our mouse on this semicircle and move the mouse wheel, the shadows will get lighter and darker. And it also works on the others, the master and midtones and lightness, etc. Really cool. Here's a really nice handy little tip to make life easier. You can auto adjust or reset multiple images at once. Let's have a look. If I select all of these images, click the first one, then shift click the last one. Now we have 4 images selected. Now if we click on reset adjustments on selected variants, it will reset all of them. They've all been reset. Or we could select a variety of images. Hold Control while selecting images to pick out the individual images you would like to select. This time I've selected 3. And if we hit the Auto Adjust button, they've all been auto adjusted. It's auto adjusted the images that I have selected. And now I can reset these 3 selected just by hitting the reset button. And it also works with, if I just select a couple, it also works with individual adjustments. Adjustments with the little A in the menu, like so. If I go down to the levels, for instance, and hit A, it will set the levels on both of these selected images. And if I hold Control and press R on the keyboard, it will reset all the selected images. And if I select all of them again, and go to maybe exposure, hit A, it will automatically set the exposure on the selected images. You can use auto adjustments from some individual panels, or the global auto adjust, or reset multiple images at once. Cool! Here's a nice quick tip that could help you out with your editing. Sometimes you may find that when you're editing you overdo the edit and it'd be nice to tone it down a little bit. But you're stuck. You've created your edit and without going into every single slider and panel, you can't just dial it down. There's actually a really easy way to achieve this. Perform your colour edit on a layer. Hold down the plus in the Layers panel and click New Filled Layer. Now you have a layer, and on that layer we will do our colour edit. Let's just name the layer something like colouring. I'll just do my colour edit on this new layer. Okay, so let's just go in and do a few things. Let's do the highlights and the shadows. Now I've overdone the recovering of highlights, but that's okay. So let's just bring in the blacks and the whites on the levels panel, and then I'll up the saturation. Now let's say a day's gone by and I've left it, then I've come back to the image and I've thought, oh, that looks a little bit overdone, and I want to dial back the whole of the edit. I like the edit, but it's just too much. Well, I just go to the layer, click on my layer and bring down the opacity. I can just dial back the edit until I'm comfortable with it. And of course you could give yourself even greater control. If I just reset this image, you could go halfway. I'll just add the filled layer as before, like so, and then set the opacity to 50%. Okay, so we'll just do an edit, make it a little bit extreme, play with the shadows and highlights a little bit, and again we'll just play with the levels a little bit, bring in the blacks and the whites. I think that's about fine. Then in the colour balance I'll just bring the shadows down, then maybe I'll make it nice and summery by adding orange to the midtones, then up the highlights to give the image a little more pop. And I think while I'm here I'll add a little more saturation. Then when I come back to the edit I may think it's either underdone or overdone. All I have to do is go to my layer, and if it's underdone, increase the opacity, and if it's overcooked I'll decrease the opacity. So by using a layer and using the layer's opacity slider, you can have complete control over the impact of your edit. I think that's pretty handy. In this tip I'll show you that it's perfectly possible to use the Nik Collection with Capture One Pro. Now owned by DxO, it used to be owned by Google. All I have to do is right click on the image in the library, pick Edit With, and it doesn't appear in my list at the moment. I don't know why. So I'll just browse and then navigate to the location on your drive where the Nik Collection resides. On mine it's Program Files, DxO, Nik Collection, and at the moment I'm in Color Effects Pro 4 and 64-bit. I'll click back to Nik Collection and there you can see the various Nik Collection modules. They're in the Program Files, DxO, Nik Collection. This time I will use Color Effects Pro 4. So click into Color Effects Pro 4 and then I'll choose the 64-bit as I have a 64-bit machine, and then double click Color Effects Pro 4.exe. Then set your size, etc. I'll use TIFF 16-bit and just click Open. And you see Capture One creates the image, opens the Nik Collection, and after a few seconds your image appears, in this case in Color Effects Pro 4. And now I can use the Color Effects filters. We'll start with one of my favourites, which is Pro Contrast. Just for this demo, whack it up to maximum. Then we'll add a new filter, and I think we'll add Detail Extractor. And we'll just set it to something reasonably sensible, about there. Then we'll make it large details, and that will do for now. So I'll just hit save, like so. And then Nik Collection will save the adjusted image back into the source folder, where it will eventually appear back in Capture One Pro. And this does take a little while, a few seconds. It's having to compile the new image and then export it. It is worth the wait though, as the Nik Collection has some fantastic effects which you just can't achieve within Capture One. And there we go, the image is here. As you can see, there are our adjustments made within the Nik Collection. The colour balance tool can be a little fiddly to use. sometimes. Let's take a little look at it here. Now let's start with the three-way view. In the three-way view, the controls are very small. They're a little fiddly to use and obviously not as accurate as if they were bigger. Or you have the individual controls, where you can select your master, shadows, midtones and highlights, etc. And they're great, they're nice and large, but you have to keep switching between them, which slows you down, and you also don't have them next to each other for reference. You can create yourself a custom tool tab which makes this job much easier. All we do is right click up here like so, and then go to Add Tool Tab, and then select Custom Tool Tab at the bottom. Now type in the name of this new tab. I'll just call it Color Balance, and then from the icon drop down here, choose yourself an icon. I'll use the one. Then go over to your newly created tab and click on it. And now we can populate this tab with tools. We can have more than one of the same tool on one tab. If we right click within the tab and then select our tool, we'll choose Color Balance and do the same again. Right click, add tool, Color Balance, and once more right click, add tool, Color Balance. Now we just go to our individual color balance tools and set one to shadow here, one to midtones and one to highlights. And voila, we now have the three separate color balance tools: shadows, midtones and highlights. So now I can alter the highlight color like so, and I can go into the midtone color if I feel like doing so, and maybe alter the midtone brightness. And I can also do the same with the shadows. Let's give this one nice deep blue shadows. And the great thing is, I don't have to perform multiple clicks and waste time switching between them. They're much easier to use. And it's quicker to switch to a single tab than to switch constantly between the shadows, midtones and highlights when I'm making multiple fine adjustments to my image. Nice. And now here's a final quick tip from a viewer called Mike Asked, who was kind enough to let me know about this in the comments. So I thought I'd share it with you guys. Since Mike let me know, I found it extremely useful and use it all the time. If you left click and hold down on the name of any slider, it will temporarily reset the slider whilst the mouse button is held down. Let's do it with the highlights like so, to its default of 0 and back to my setting of 100. Same with the shadows, 0 is the default. Let go, back to 100. Go to structure, left button down, default 0, let go and back to my value. I think this is really good. You can instantly check the effect of a single slider.